I'm not sitting on a chair waiting for the house to burn down, right? So I try to take initiative and make the most out of any situation. I think maybe this is a trait of my personality, and we're definitely facing new challenges today. The world is going in all sorts of directions, and so understanding who are your allies, what kind of agenda you want to continue to drive, what kind of leader you want to be, it's something that I always ask myself on a daily basis. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, whether you are left, right, or center, when the fundamental rights of people are eroded, it's never really good news for anyone. I started my career at the Italian news agency called ANSA, which is the biggest Italian news agency in the country. And I happened to be an intern during 9/11. And so I basically worked more than 16 hours between September the 11th and the 12th. And I got a full-time contract on September the 13th because I happened to be fluent in English. And I told my parents, I'm doing this interview and the piece is going to air at news at 10 in Italy. So if you want to watch it, watch it. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it, but it's going to be airing. It's a dream of mine, but I wish every passport was equally powerful.
Every leader has a story to tell, and the Safe Leader podcast uncovers the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. Join me, your host, Mark McBride-Wright, as we hear from business leaders, academics, entrepreneurs, and agents of change as they share their journeys of innovation, resilience, and transformation. Together, we explore how they embrace the principles of safe leadership, sharing, acting, feeling, and empowering to create safer, more inclusive environments for everyone. Hello, welcome to the next episode of the Safe Leader podcast. I am delighted to be joined today by Antonio Zappulla, who is the CEO of Thomson Reuters Foundation. So Antonio is an accomplished executive celebrated for his commitment to driving global strategic initiatives with a focus on independent media, access to the law, and responsible business. As the CEO of the Thomson Reuters Foundation, Antonio leads groundbreaking efforts to tackle some of the world's most pressing socio-economic challenges. A true innovator, Antonio has forged high-impact partnerships across private, public, and civil society sectors, leveraging his experience in strategic planning, organizational leadership, and transformational change. He is also a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion, particularly in the LGBTQ+ community. He served as the co-chair of Pride at Work and as a board member of Open for Business and All Out. Recognized for his contributions to the public service and philanthropy, Antonio was knighted under the Order of Merit of the Republic of Italy, the country's highest civilian honour. He's a proud alumnus of Stanford University's prestigious LEAD programme and brings a wealth of experience from a career that spans journalism, philanthropy, and global leadership. Antonio, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too, finally. You and I have crossed paths virtually over the years, been connected for a long time, but never actually met.
And here we are.
Here we are. So thanks for agreeing to join the podcast this season. And so one of the things I'd like getting to know is what has helped shape the person that's in front of us. You know, what has driven your decision making to get you to where you're at now. So if we go back in time to the younger than you are now, Antonio, you've had a career that spans journalism, philanthropy, global leadership. What were some of the key moments that led you to that you took to get to where you're at now? What inspired you?
Look, I think it's if you believe in any science behind the personality tests, right? I'm an ENTJ, which means that I'm curious. I'm an extrovert. I'm pretty intuitive, and I have this ability of taking decisions quite quickly, and I think this is really. I mean, I definitely see myself in this course, and I think my career in journalism has certainly shaped who I am as a person and as a professional. I started my career at the Italian news agency called ANSA, which is the biggest Italian news agency in the country. And I happened to be an intern during 9/11. And so I basically worked more than 16 hours between September the 11th and the 12th. And I got a full-time contract on September the 13th because I happened to be fluent in English. I was studying abroad. I was studying in the UK at the time. I was only in Rome for my internship, and half of the newsroom at the time was on holiday. So my career in journalism, I think, has shaped who I am as a professional for a number of reasons. I would say the first one is that it really exposed me to a global perspective. It made me really understand how events that happen somewhere in the world are intrinsically correlated to events that might happen in a complete different side of the world. So this correlation between global events, I think it's something that I really value. It also forced me to take decisions really fast, because after working at ANSA, I actually joined Bloomberg Television, and I worked at Bloomberg Television in London for over a decade. And I was first a TV presenter for their Italian channel, and then I became a producer and an executive producer for their US channel based in the UK. So, when you work on live TV, in live TV, you really have split seconds at times to take decisions because you're live. So this ability to take really decisions fast is something that I definitely retained. And it also really allowed me to, especially working in the television industry, to get exposed to a wide range of different personalities. So the producers, the on-air talent, the technical talent, the ownership, and they all speak very different languages. They all have very different interests at play. And being at the center of this ecosystem really gave me the opportunity to, understand the different interests and understand how these different stakeholders were coming together. And so, it gave me the ability to read the room quite quickly and again, be able to take decisions in that context. I think the other critical moment, if you want, looking back at the younger me, was definitely COVID, because I took over the role of CEO of the Thomson Reuters Foundation in April 2019. And then essentially shortly after, we had COVID and we had a lockdown, and I was running the organization essentially from home, when working from home was obviously not what we were used to do. And it really forced me to stay internally focused, shape the organization at a critical moment in time, really finding our strength, what we call our USP, hone in our programming, deliver our programming. And we definitely emerged as a result of that as a stronger organization. So these two moments, I think, are really pivotal for me, the beginning and the start of my career, and this big challenge that happened, perhaps at the biggest moment in my career, where, I became CEO, when I became CEO of the organization.
Yeah, you've. It sounds like two of arguably some of the most significant events that have happened in the last 10 to 15 years, 20 odd years even. You've been in the right place at the right time, or been able to have an expanded remit, and that's helped shape what you do. And do you think is that part of your personality as well, though? It's a take opportunities as soon as they come, and run with them. You strike me as that kind of guy.
Definitely. I mean, I'm not sitting on a chair waiting for the house to burn down, right? So I try to take initiative and make the most out of any situation. And so I think maybe this is a trait of my personality, and we're definitely facing new challenges today. The world is going in all sorts of directions, and so understanding who are your allies, what kind of agenda you want to continue to drive, what kind of leader you want to be,
Yeah.
it's something that I always ask myself on a daily basis. I don't believe in the status quo. I think change is good. I think change presents opportunities even when we cannot immediately see it. I mean, if you look back at what happened during COVID, we are, we definitely work in a different way. We have a different approach to so many things. And I think, again, that was a critical moment in society. But as a society, we responded really well and we emerged stronger because I think we're much more prepared for a new pandemic if it had to happen tomorrow. So I think moments of crisis can also generate huge opportunity if you can capitalize on it.
So if we just go back to that moment then when that change was thrust upon you, how are you? Well, it'd be great to know, find out a bit about what you're doing now at Thomson Reuters in terms of the business itself, the organization. But how what have you retained from how you had to adapt in that adversity, in that challenge when COVID happened?
I mean, look, during COVID, the challenges that I had to face were significant. They were internal and external. I had just became CEO. And so I had a whole organization that knew me to a certain extent because I had been the COO and the director of comms before. But the directors that now reporting to me, so my executive leadership team, they were essentially my peers. And I wanted to establish a different type of leadership for the organization. And I had to do this whilst reframing the critical role of the mission of the organization in a fast changing environment, risking losing significant amount of funding. We developed a lot of initiatives on the ground. We were grounded. We couldn't travel. So really, the challenges were internal and external. So, establishing my leadership with my peers was one challenge. Transforming the organization was another challenge, and doing this in an environment that was quite scary, quite frankly. So the challenges were many, and I think we emerged definitely stronger. I think my takeaways, I think if you want from there, is that if you believe in what you're doing, if you think that you're doing the right thing, if you believe that you're taking the right decisions, just do it. And yes, you might make mistakes, but if the spirit that's behind your decisions, if the intent behind your decisions is something that you can back up because it's coherent with your values, and people can also understand that you're not just doing it from a position of leadership for the sake of leadership.
Yeah.
I believe very much in consensus building. So I think the people that work for me could definitely tell that I was taking the decisions that I was taking at the time for the good of the organization. And so if you take your personal ego aside and you work for the benefit of the organization and you make that very clear to your team, I think your team will back you up.
That's the idea of sort of servant leadership, isn't it? Being there to help make a bigger purpose. And usually I find leaders that really lean into that are like yourself, where you've given some of your time as well to philanthropic or external. You're not just in the day job, you're also helping support other organizations as well with your leadership skills. So I was interested to just explore a bit further when you've worked with your advocacy in the LGBTQ plus community, and how has that been part of the arc of your development in your career?
I mean, that's part of who I am. I mean, I've been openly gay man. I came out actually at the age of 21 when I was here in this country. I was living in Italy before. I mean, I was living in Italy until the age of 18. So, I mean, it's my way of giving back to the community. And it happened also at a moment in time where we won at the time many battles. If you think about equal marriage, stepchild adoption, decriminalization, a wave of decriminalization that happened in the past 15 years. I think it was also a good moment to lend my voice to this cause. I think it's, as I said, it's my way of giving back to the community, and so I served on a number of boards. I think the key point for me is that I being a gay man is a component of who I am. I mean, it doesn't define everything that I do. It's a key component of who I am, but I see myself really like as an onion. I have many different layers, but this is clearly a layer that I wanted to peel and to definitely and do definitely something with it. I think perhaps one of the contribution was creating Openly, which is an LGBT news and information platform that covers the many issues affecting the lives of LGBT people around the world. And I'm actually very proud of the work that the team is doing with Openly, which is still going strong.
And we're recording this in February 2025, where the LGBTQ community is facing significant headwinds, challenges compared to what we've had thus far. So where do you see things playing out now? With the Trump administration coming in and executive orders coming out that are really regressive for the progress that our community's made. How do we get through this?
Look, it's difficult to tell because we only week 4, I think, of the new administration, and it's not really just about the Trump administration. There is we've seen what's happened in Uganda, we've seen what's happened in other countries around the world when it comes to LGBT rights. I think, look, wherever you are on the political spectrum, whether you are left, right, or center, when the fundamental rights of people are eroded, it's never really good news for anyone. And I think the last century has reminded us of that. And I think we need to go back to what is the fundamental, Declaration of Human Rights, which protects the rights of individuals. I think it's important that civil society comes together, and I don't think that this is simply an LGBT rights plus issue. I think there is an overarching issue of shrinking civil society around the world and also in the Western world. And I think it's really important that collaboration it's really at the center of everything that we do, and that goes way beyond the LGBT community. I'm thinking of climate advocates or climate journalists. I'm thinking of again organizations that campaign for the rights of women, the rights of indigenous communities. I think it's at this moment in time, it's important that civil society sticks together, and they try to find themes and where they can where they can actually come together to make sure that the interest of the different communities are served. It's difficult to say and to tell what's happening. There are obviously rights that are enshrined in constitutions or legislation that has already been passed, and I think every geography has their different challenges. So I wish I could tell you more, but again, it's I don't know how the world will look like in a couple of months or at the end of the year. My hope is that, again, fundamental rights of people, whether they are members of the LGBT community, whether they are indigenous people, will be preserved, and that civil society will find solutions to defend those rights. And there are solutions, there are legal solutions to defend those rights.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very true, very true. Um, so I was in what was going through my mind there was when you said about like in different geographies and things changing, things evolving. How you mentioned you came out as a young man when in Italy. How are things now compared to how they were back then?
You mean in Italy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think the situation has improved significantly. So I came out actually in the UK. So I wasn't out when I was in Italy. But then again, I left pretty young. I left at the age of 19 to come to the UK and study. And I found a very different environment. These were, the early 2000s were the years of, again, we had equal marriage in civil partnerships in this country in 2004. So I was really amazed about what I was seeing. And even before that, in Spain, Zapatero legalized gay marriage even before the UK. So it was a different moment in time, and I felt really empowered. And also I was financially independent. I was working at Bloomberg at the time. So it was in a way easier for me to come out because I was removed from a context which was much more challenging at the time. I think every time I go back to Italy now and I go every year, I can see how the environment has improved, especially for the younger generations. My mom is a teacher and she retired just after COVID, and she did tell me that she had actually openly gay students in class, and she's retired, but she was a high school teacher. Now that was completely unthinkable for me. I'm 46, but when I went to school, no one was gay, definitely not at school, and actually more problematically, nobody was openly a member of the gay community, even in public life. I mean, the only, I think, LGBT role models that I could think were Dolce and Gabbana or, perhaps somebody else at a local level. But there wasn't really an openly gay politician. There wasn't an openly gay astronaut. There wasn't an openly gay athlete. I mean, they were really, it was really rare. And so, and in fact, all the examples that I could point to were pretty negative, were people living within my community, my city, that were actually mocked for being gay. And so it gave me this sense of, fear. Like I definitely didn't want to be associated with that reality. It has changed a lot. I think a result of a number of things. I think actually TV and media entertainment has definitely played a significant role in normalizing the conversation in Italy, but there are still some fundamental rights that are not there. So, for example, stepchild adoption is not legal. If a gay couple, especially two women, have IVF to have a child, there is no possibility for the second parent to be on the birth certificate. Italy just criminalized as an international crime surrogacy. There are still very little protections if you are a member of the gay community in order to be protected from evictions. There are still significant components of legislation that I would hope would be revised, and simply starting from, again, putting ideology aside, given that we're living in a world where everything is so toxic and toxified. I think the starting point is that if I pay taxes as you do, why would I be at risk of being evicted simply for who I love and for who I am? That doesn't make any sense. If you take religion out of the context, if you take ideology out of the context, from a pragmatic level, I am a taxpayer. I should be having your same rights. And I think it's a logical argument that, again, strips this conversation of all the different layers of toxicity. It's just about access to rights.
Hmm. So how did you feel then when you were announced as number one on the Financial Times outstanding executive lists one year?
I felt I had to call my parents because my parents have been amazing with me. Like there was never been an issue about, again, there was never resistance or opposition, or they were very welcoming. They met my partner at the time, but every time I would go home, until that moment, it was always Antonio and his friend when talking to their friends. And I think I remember I called my parents because the Italian news, Rai, which is the Italian equivalent of the BBC, did a story when the index came out, and I told my parents, I'm doing this interview and the piece is going to air at news at 10 in Italy. So if you want to watch it, watch it. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. But it's going to be airing. And I framed it this way because I didn't want this to be a debate or a conversation. I wanted to inform them of the fact that I was doing it. And actually, my dad was like, "Oh, this is great. We should tell everybody." And from that moment onwards, it was no longer Antonio and his friend. It was Antonio and his partner, and they send the link to everybody that they know. So it was a really nice moment for me. But again, I do reflect on the fact that these moments shouldn't be the result of nice achievements. Of course, it's nice to be on a fancy list on the FT, but there are people that don't get on a fancy list of the FT, and they are equally valuable because of the work that they're doing in their communities, or just the fact that they simply they want to live their lives for who they are and who they love. And so I feel privileged about the fact that I had this career, I had these acknowledgements that allowed me to come out perhaps in an easier way than others, and I try to do my best not to forget that.
And coming full circle, that allows you to be an open and visible role model to other young Italians, where when you only had the Dolce and Gabbanas or the other maybe more negative local role models, there's now this list of people, and you're there as one of them, who people can look up to and aspire to. I think they're important, those lists at times. They can feel a little bit performative sometimes, but
No, I agree. I agree with you. I mean, they are important because they normalize the conversation. They are absolutely important. They do show people within the community that it's you don't risk being that you can live your professional life in full and regardless of who you are and who you love. And I think I absolutely agree with you. I think they do serve a significant purpose.
So tell me a bit more about the Thomson Reuters Foundation then.
Thomson,
What
Thomson Reuters.
Thomson Reuters Foundation.
I tell you a secret. Every time we receive a CV that says Thomas Reuters, it goes straight in the bin. It's the easiest selection process.
Well, I'm not applying for any jobs there. Yes, Thomson Reuters. Tell me a bit more about it and what live projects, to the extent that you're able to. I appreciate some might be confidential, but what's under your focus at the moment?
The organization has three areas of focus that we work to. Our mission is to strengthen free, fair, and informed societies. And we do this through a combination of media, legal initiatives, and data intelligence. What that practically means is that we work to foster the resilience of independent media. So we work with thousands of journalists every year for capacity building, training, financial support. At the moment, we're doing tons of work on AI implementation in smaller newsrooms in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. We're doing research on AI, polling our community of more than 15,000 journalists. We are doing capacity building work in Ukraine. I mean, our work, it's mostly focused around the global majority and Eastern Europe. The second pillar of our work is called access to the law. And we run the largest pro bono legal platform that provides free legal assistance to NGOs and social enterprises and journalists around the world. And that's a massive portfolio of work. Just to give you a sense, we've put into this work about £1.5 million of our own core funding every year, but we are able to leverage about $45 million of pro bono legal support every year. So it's massive. It's the largest pro bono legal network. Over 100,000 lawyers in the network, 6,000 NGOs, hundreds of journalists, and it's very global. And we provide free legal assistance in the form of operating support. So an NGO might come to us because they need to draft a contract, or they need to register in another jurisdiction, or they need to, essentially anything that you would pay a lawyer for, they come to us and we connect them with lawyers that work pro bono. But we also critically do a lot of legal research, which oftentimes is cross-jurisdictional, so encompasses multiple jurisdictions. It brings together multiple lawyers that work from multiple jurisdictions, and it allows those NGOs to do advocacy in a much more powerful way, because the advocacy is then, if you want, powered by legal arguments. And so oftentimes this research contributes to a changing policy on the ground. And we have really dozens of examples of where our legal research has helped NGOs in changing policy around the world. And then the third pillar of our work is called responsible business. And here we work with hundreds of companies around the world to do no harm. And we have two sub-pillars, if you want, sub-pillars of our work. One is centered around workforce and supply chain. And the second, which is the newest portfolio of work, is really related to ethical corporate adoption of AI.
Wow, that's really interesting.
We're busy. We're very busy. We are constantly busy and constantly growing and evolving, which is great, which is exciting.
How do you generate your revenue? Is it as a foundation? Is it donations? Is it philanthropic sources? Is it do you do partnerships with corporates?
It's all of the above. I think the only thing we don't really receive is donations. I mean, first of all, we're not a grant-making foundation, so we essentially run programs that are free for the beneficiaries, but we don't give grants. So if you write to me and say there is this great local projects that needs funding, can you fund us? And I'll have to say no, because we're not a grant-making foundation. But we do fund our beneficiaries through the programs that we develop and run and fundraise for. Obviously, our major donor is Thomson Reuters, and that's they've been funding us since 1983. And then we also have other donors. We have institutional donors, so we work with governments. around the world. We have corporate donors that support mostly our corporate responsibilities, our responsible business portfolio. We have foundations that fund parts of our work. So it's a very diverse mix of stakeholders, which is actually is difficult to manage because obviously you have multiple stakeholders, but at the same time it's actually really good because it makes the organization much more resilient. And so we're much more resilient from a financial perspective in an environment that can be quite schizophrenic at times when it comes to funding.
You're less exposed to like just a single source of
Definitely.
income. One thing that caught my ear there was in your responsible business sub pillar, do no harm. Can you just talk us through that? That sounds to me like what the organizations we work with when we talk about safety strategies and the ability for people to go to work and go home safely without fear of being injured or what have you. But that really does drive the culture in a lot of businesses. Do no harm. So just interested in the work that you do through the responsible business part, and you also mentioned there that corporates tend to be interested in that. So I think if you could just expand on that a bit further, I think some of our listeners would be keen to hear more on that.
Sure. And by the way, if you ever want to dig more into what I'm saying, just go on our website. It's easy to remember. It's trust.org, and you'll find, definitely a much more detailed accounts of everything that I'm discussing here. So our responsible business portfolio has, as I said, two sub pillars. The first one is focused on workforce. The second one is focused on AI adoption. The first one is really looking at how companies are essentially implementing, how the workforce of a company looks like. So they voluntarily disclose to us a number of indicators that give us a sense of, the minimum pay levels that they offer to the workforce, and multiple issues around really supply chain and direct operations. And it's quite a large program. We collect data that really represents over 8 million workers worldwide. And we have over 100 companies that voluntarily disclose through our platform that is called Workforce Disclosure Initiative, also known as WDI. And WDI has companies that disclose voluntarily these indicators that are worth more than $8 trillion in market cap. And then this data is given to investors that use this data to make responsible investment decisions as they wish. And there is about $10 trillion of asset under management on the other side of the equation. So again, we are the broker between the companies that want to disclose voluntarily how they are, what they're doing in their operations in terms of supply chain, and then give this data to investors. And obviously, investors have a massive interest in making sure that they understand the materiality of these issues. I mean, if you think about all the conversations that we've been having in the past couple of years about, slavery in supply chain or, abusive working conditions. I'm thinking of Rana Plaza, the conversation around the £1 t-shirt and who makes your t-shirt. I mean, that is exactly the type of conversation we are having with both the companies and the investors. Now, the newest portfolio that we actually launched in October, our Trust Conference, it's a partnership with the UN, it's a partnership with UNESCO. UNESCO has done a lot of work in developing a framework for ethical adoption of AI, and mostly working with corporates and governments. And now we are really focusing on on companies, and we are asking companies to, again, fill in another voluntary questionnaire that will allow to disclose how they are embedding AI technology in their products, services, and operations. So we're not talking here about producers of AI tools. We're talking about implementers of AI tools. So we're really shifting the conversation from the way this AI technology is being produced to the way these AI tools are actually being adopted. And adoption is obviously, as you know, going really fast because every company is really trying to make sense of how to adopt this technology to be ahead of the game, to beat their competitors. We want to make sure that this conversation is done because obviously we believe in the power of AI in innovating and unlocking new potential, but at the same time we want to make sure that it does no harm. And so we're asking questions such as, do you have an AI strategy? Who is in charge legally through the life cycle of the AI tool? Are you looking at upskilling or reskilling your workers? Do you have any remediation policies? Any issues and risks related to data privacy, data bias, data provenance? we believe that the majority of, especially SMEs, have very, very little clue about any of these issues. And so the idea is to present them with a questionnaire that they can voluntarily decide to fill in, not to fill in, and as much as they would like to fill in. But that will essentially become a northern star for CEOs, CTOs, general counsels, NEDs, who, by the way, have obviously fiduciary responsibility when it comes to these companies, and really bring some clarity on how they are implementing these technologies. And if we do this right, there's a couple of winners at the end of it. First of all, the companies will be doing no harm, but at the same time they will really protect themselves from liabilities and really mitigating risk and really having clarity in the process, which they desperately need to have right now. The second winners are the consumers, because by having embarked on these processes and by disclosing this information, consumers will know which companies are taking AI tools in a certain direction or not, and will be able to trust, and make informed decisions with their money and really utilize and have agencies when they when they vote with their money. Then there's the investor community, which will soon understand that that AI adoption is critical when it comes again to the issue of materiality that they need to assess when it comes to their investment portfolios. And then we believe that this data set can also be very, very useful for governments that need to implement policies. And by understanding what's working and what's not working in implementation of AI, they will be able to develop better policies. So the goal is to create the world's largest database on corporate AI adoption, and to make sure that this becomes a fundamental pillar, if you want, in an ecosystem of trusted AI as a public good.
Wow. That's no small feat then. That's really, really ambitious. And the Paris summit's been taking place this week as well on AI. So all this is so relevant. I was in London last week when the Queen Elizabeth Prize got announced. It's essentially the Nobel Prize for engineering, and the group that won it this year were the people who essentially helped enable AI to come into existence. So yeah, machine learning and algorithms and what have you. So yeah, I think the work that you're doing then is quite pioneering and is going to be really needed to underpin proper global adoption on a trust basis in the not too far in the future, actually, at the pace that things are moving.
The time is now. We need to get going.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, I want to go on to the quick fire questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
So, what's the last book you read?
The last book I read is The Tech Coup by Mariette Schaake, and it's a fantastic book on the role of technology in society.
What's the one piece of advice that you live by?
Everything has an elevator pitch. If you can't tell a story, it's not going to happen.
Who inspires you most?
Nelson Mandela and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
A favorite place you visited?
Rio de Janeiro.
Coffee or tea?
100% coffee.
What's your go-to productivity tip?
Sleep. Sleep when you need to sleep.
That's a good one. What's one thing that you cannot live without?
Very pragmatically, I would say the Wi-Fi and the internet. I just can't live without them.
If you weren't in this career you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I'd be traveling the world. I love traveling the world.
What's your biggest achievement so far?
I rebuilt a house in Sicily, where I'm from, and I love it.
And finally, what's one thing you'd like to see change in the world?
It's a dream of mine that I wish every passport was equally powerful.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, thank you very much for your time. For everyone listening, if they want to find out more about you, about your work, about the foundation, where should they go?
Trust.org is our website, and you'll find tons of information around our work. You can also check trustconference.com. That's the website of our annual event, which, by the way, is a free event. And it's also on YouTube. So Trust Conference has also its YouTube page. Another website you want to check out is context.news, which is our news website, and context.news is also on YouTube. So but I would say trust.org is the portal, the gateway that takes you to everything, the ecosystem of TRF, as we call it internally.
Brilliant. Well, we will put that in the show notes as well so people can access this. Antonio, thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Pleasure talking to you.
You have been listening to the Safe Leader podcast, uncovering the diversity story behind leading figures championing change to make our world a better place. If you have enjoyed the episode, please subscribe to the Safe Leader podcast on your podcast platform of choice and get notified when a new episode goes live. Did you know that we also offer a full transcript on each of our podcast episodes? Check out my website, McBride-Wright.com. Here, you can also explore the training, coaching, and keynote speaking services I offer. And whilst you're there, why not join the Safe Leader community by subscribing to the Safe Leader Insights mailing list? Thank you for listening, and please come back and join us on a future episode.